Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Kalimah Book Club. I'm Samia.
I'm Shaheen. Assalamualaikum.
Yes, and we are today moving to our second session. And for in the first video, last video, we got a comment that we hadn't talked about the name of the book. We write it always in the description, and it's all over our thing. But the book that we're reading is The Refinement of Souls by Imam Ibn Ata'illah al-Sakandari. That's the book we are reading. So today what was our pages we were discussing, Shaheen, today?
15 to 26.
Yes, 15 to 26. And so welcome back. I just wanted to thank everyone because I think we had such a great turnout. Right? Like messages and our friends and families and then like random people and they're just like joining us reading. And all of you guys, we're so grateful to have you on board and talking about the book with us. I think it's wonderful.
And there's so many views after the live as well, right, on YouTube.
Yeah, it kind of went crazy. And
Yeah.
we were not anticipating it, but alhamdulillah, this is very nice. Because the more people that we can share their spirituality goals with, that our struggles with, the better it is. And I'm happy for everyone who joins us. So we made some few changes. Last one was the first one. This one we're going to make a little bit changes. But we're still going to start with the quote of the day. Let me share that. All right, quote of the day is, "By Allah, your life begins from the day you knew Allah." And this is when Imam Ibn Ata'illah again says something beautiful that knocks you off your feet. So this was on page 15. I find this book it's very, okay, obviously it's beautiful, but it's also very straightforward. And it's not, we mentioned it again, it's not too much fluff, but it's also full of so much wisdom. And I feel that as we move towards, inshallah, towards bettering ourselves, it will continue to affect us that way. Like there will be more and more things that will come up that I didn't notice now and they will come up later. Right?
Yeah.
So the quote that we shared was on page 15. Is there something that you want to say about it, Shaheen?
No, because that was not one of the quotes that touched me personally.
Really?
Yeah.
I think this
I think
quote,
I think that was one of the ones that you had put there. So I was looking forward to hearing what you had to say about it.
well, it is on in the middle of page 15, and the whole quote is, "By Allah, your life does not begin from the time you were born, nay, your life begins from the day you knew Allah."
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about kind of, like when you're reawakening yourself. And everything that you did previously doesn't really matter. Everything you did previously is something that really not only doesn't matter, but that it's absolutely worthless. Like this is his approach. Like everything you did before, it doesn't count. Everything begins when you say, "All right, I am now here with Allah." And that's when it truly begins. And so we're constantly trying. And I think the beginning of life is not like a literal beginning of life. It's more like it is beginning, your spiritual awakening is when you're truly alive. Like all of that. Everything else becomes unimportant. That's how I saw this quote, and it really hit me for that
Yeah,
reason.
now that you say that, it makes a lot more sense. I think the kind of like life of the heart, right? Not life of your body.
Yes, but then he's also saying life of the heart is the only thing that's important. Everything else isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of makes sense too because, when you go think of the hereafter and stuff, your body decomposes. It goes through all that, Allah raises it and everything, but it's always secondary. Your soul and your heart is always the topmost thing. Everything else is always secondary. And I think that's kind of what he's saying here as well to me.
Yeah.
That's what I thought about that. So, actually, we have a title on the screen, and I forgot to mention. So, the title, we're going to divide this discussion into different titles, and we have 4 different titles for you guys. And the discussion that is being divided is based on the pages that we read. So, Shaheen, tell me a little bit about how you divided the titles so that everyone can be on the same board.
Okay, so basically, last time, the way we kind of went through the discussion is that we were going in order, like we went page by page, and we were just kind of picking out quotes that stood out to us, and we were having a discussion. But I guess some of you guys pointed out that we should have had more structure. So we took that into account and we decided that this time we're going to take our reading and we're going to basically divide it into 4 sections. So we came up with these 4 sections. The title is going to be on the screen, and then we're going to share a quote from the section, which is also going to be on the screen, and then we'll share some extra quotes as well. Yeah, we'll probably just read those quotes and then we're going to talk about it. So that way you guys have more structure as we're going through our discussion.
Yes, and I don't know if you guys had a chance to see the show notes. If you go to click on the link in the description, the show notes will take you there, and all the quotes that we discussed are all over there, so you can go back to it, copy and paste them. If you decide to use them, like in their social media, please tag us. I want to see how you use the quotes. I think that'd be wonderful. Okay, so moving on to the first on envy. So this was the beginning section that he began. Envy is sheer ignorance. That's the title that I have in my book. And this is a quote that we wanted to share. You are occupied with what you have not been given. This is like an umbrella of envy when you're occupied with not been given. So Shani, do you want to begin with the discussion on this one?
Yeah, sure. So, in the paragraph where this quote came from, he was basically talking about how um, the worldly minded people, right, like people who are kind of obsessed with this world and not the hereafter, they're focused on the things that they have and they're preoccupied with it to the point where they're not really focusing on the things that are important, right? But it kind of makes sense for them to be preoccupied because they have those things. So he's saying it's even more ridiculous and it's more ignorant of somebody who doesn't have those things because it's like you're getting distracted with something you don't even have, right? So it's one thing if Allah gives you and then that thing distracts you, but like you don't even have that thing. Like maybe you're focused on somebody else's money or their family or their success or something like that, and it's ignorance because it's not like the smart thing to do, right? Like the smart thing to do for a believer is to focus on what matters, to focus on the hereafter, to focus on their own blessings. But when you're concerned with other people's blessings and what they have been given, it's a type of ignorance. So I think that's why he says envy is sheer ignorance.
Actually, I was listening to on Instagram, Abdul Rahman Murphy. So he was doing a reading of an Al Ghazali book. I don't know which one it is. And he said something that has been really hitting me since then. And he said that when you are looking at somebody and you're like, wow, like at that moment, you are completely ungrateful what you really have right now. So you're like, wow, this person has so much. At that moment, you're like, oh, I am not grateful for what I have. That kind of goes through in the back of your mind. And I'm like, oh, this is very true. I don't know, like a long time ago, I used to watch those House Hunters International. Have you seen those? I used to watch those
I don't know.
shows.
It sounds familiar though.
It would be like a couple would be like hunting for a house that either locally or internationally, doesn't matter, and they would be hunting houses and they show you the houses and stuff. And I remember this was a couple of years back, and I would watch them. I'm like, yeah, it come to a point where I started wanting that too. I'm like, oh wow, the beach house, wow, it makes you.
Yeah.
And then I was like, it's making me want to feel like the house I have right now is like not good enough. Like I literally had that, and I'm like, okay, I need to stop watching this because it's like not only making me, it's making me ungrateful for what I already have. And I think that happens a lot when you're looking at something. For me, that was my weakness, and I figured it out. And for other people, or for you who's watching, it might be something else. And you're like, oh, look, this is something so beautiful. Oh, I wish I had that. Even if it comes into someone's sense of spirituality. Because on Instagram, I know that we share a lot of that stuff. And there's some people who are doing, mashallah, amazing things. And you're like, oh, no, I don't. But are you cultivating what you have? The state that Allah is giving you right now. Are you mindful of it? Are you cultivating it? So that makes me think of all of those things. This quote. So the next thing I had to share was also on page 15. And it was what a world of difference there is between felicitous people and wretched people. When felicitous people see a person committing act of disobedience to Allah, they outwardly condemn him while privately praying for him. So this is talking about when you see somebody doing something wrong, how do you address that? And he says, goes on, in contrast, wretched people may condemn the person of self-gratification and even tarnish his reputation. So I think it really occurred to me because at this point we're going through something online in our Muslim community. There's a lot of disturbances happening. and how to approach that, it is so important. And I loved how he said that the wretched person, completely a person destroyed, is someone who tarnishes their reputation and focuses on them. And when the person who is truly felicitous, like, what is another word to say that, because I cannot pronounce that, like a
I
blessed
think it's
person, happy person.
righteous people, maybe.
Yeah, a person, right, let's use
Yeah.
that. A righteous person is focused on, okay, yeah, you're not silent in that way, that you are open about saying, okay, this is wrong, and I say it openly, but then inwardly, we're making dua for that person because we care about it. That person's a believer, is a Muslim, regardless of wherever they stand. We care about that person and we feel the loss, right? Because when we see someone doing something wrong, it hurts. And we have a lot of hijabis, mashallah, who are now removing their hijab too, and it's painful. Like, we're like, no, please don't do this. This is what I find myself doing. Please don't, please, because this is something beautiful. And the embracing of that, of something that is good, is beautiful. And when it's the opposite, is painful. And I think that focus needs to be, let me make dua for that person rather than let me call them out or cancel them, in my understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything more to add?
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the whole hijabi thing because I feel like we go off of people's appearances so much. Like, it's one thing to advise somebody in private because you care about them, because you have built that relationship with them where you have this mutual understanding and, mutual care and concern for somebody. But if you're just a random person on the internet, like, first of all, why are they going to listen to you? Right? And then the way some people in the comment section kind of like condemn them to hell or like, just judge them and make all these sort of assumptions about their personal life. I just feel like whoever's doing that, like, I think really needs to watch themselves and like really just check themselves on the inside. Like, are you really advising them for the sake of Allah? Like, are you just kind of trying to feel better about yourself?
That's according to him. That is a behavior of a wretched person who openly
Yeah.
condemns them. And yeah, the righteous person is always like, hey, this is kind of wrong, but then you're making dua for that person at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah.
I always wonder, has there been like a brother who has like shaved his beard and made it like a point of it? I don't think I've seen one.
I love that. Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, oh yeah, oh my God. But I don't know. I don't know if there would be the equal amount of condemnation if he was shaving his beard because, oh, it's only a beard, brother. But then, oh, a hijab, you might as well not even be a Muslim. It's like, you might want to slow down
Yeah.
on that. Maybe that's not the best approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how much judgment brothers get when they are not like outwardly looking religious. I guess it depends on the people they keep company with because I have seen both. I guess some people they do get a lot of judgment
Mm-hmm.
and like if they don't like have a long beard or if they don't have like wear their pants above the ankles, then in some circles they are judged as well.
Yeah.
I think it's some very like I guess strict circles where people are not very open-minded. And where there's a lot of focus on the outward appearance, I guess they can get judged as well.
Yeah.
But I think online, there definitely is a lot more policing of women and their hijab choices. Definitely.
It reminds me of the previous section we talked about in that emulation is important, outward and internal. I think on the other side, when the whole situation happens, is that focus goes too much on the internal, on that person who might be struggling. So they're like, oh, this is just a piece of cloth. It doesn't really matter. But what we're learning is that outward and internal are both equally important and they need to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't diminish any side, but at the same time, we approach the person going through that with a little bit more compassion and not condemnation of that person. And then on our part, we are privately praying for him, as he says.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anything else you wanted to add on this section before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I feel like the more we talk about it, the more like thoughts are coming to me. I was just thinking about how like when we preoccupy ourselves with what other people are doing, it's almost as if we've forgotten how much work we have left to do.
So true.
Like it's like people just kind of they always are in other people's business, especially online. Like, oh, did you hear what this person did? Did you hear what this person did? But it's like, have you taken care of your own self today? Like, have you done your muhasaba? Which the word muhasaba, I forgot to define it last time. It was basically taking yourself to account, right? Like taking account of your deeds, that day, right? Reflecting on your deeds, what you did wrong that day, what did you do right, stuff like that. So it's like people think that they have like they're basically done working on themselves, that they can now go and comment on other people, right? And I don't want to take away from like the whole idea of like enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, but it's like people, I think they're always when you're always in other people's business or you always have somebody else to talk about, it kind of reflects the state of your heart because it's like, where are your priorities? Like why is other people's lives like why are other people's lives such a big concern, right?
Yeah. I mean, forbidding good, forbidding evil, and joining good, there's etiquettes to that.
Hmm.
And for me, just to be talking about a person who's like in another country, it makes no sense. It really
Hmm.
doesn't. Unless I'm addressing it into my private group of circle where we're talking about an issue, okay, let's address that. But if I'm just
Hmm.
going to be like, oh, I cannot believe, comment, 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 how could you?
Hmm.
You're destroying our deen. Well, they're not responsible for your deen. They're not responsible for my deen. We're responsible for our own deen. And honestly,
Yeah.
if at this point, if I'm like looking at a person who does something wrong and I feel shaken in my faith, that's a
Hmm.
fault in me. I
Yeah.
allowed that person to be a source of figure for me when they weren't even worthy of it, clearly, you know?
Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah.
be really mindful, like, what are we really doing here? Is
Yeah.
my condemnation, what is that doing?
Hmm.
I like what you said. It's like focusing, not even focusing on yourself. That's what this is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Should we go to the next topic?
Yes. Let's go.
All right. The next topic is on self rectification. And this is a quote that we wanted to share with you guys. If you see in yourself apathy to obedience, base desires, and obliviousness, then know that these are attributes from yourself. But if you see in yourself remorse, humility, and abstinence, then these are from the workings of Allah. So, Shaheen, what did you want to talk about this quote?
Um, well, I think this is primarily a call to humility because I think what he's trying to say is that if you see bad in yourself, if you're obeying your nafs, if you're obeying your desires, if you're falling into sin and obliviousness, which is kind of like being heedless of Allah, then that's from yourself because you have allowed yourself to be distracted, you've allowed yourself to be taken away from the remembrance of Allah. But then he says if you see in yourself remorse, inaba, humility, and abstinence, and I'm assuming that means abstinence from sin, then he said from the workings of Allah. So it's kind of like anything good that we see in ourselves, we're supposed to attribute it back to Allah. And that this reminds me of something that my one of my teachers taught us in school a long time ago. In Surah Al-Kahf, there's a story of the two men, right, and with the gardens, and then the one who had the garden that was flourishing, he was kind of like he became arrogant and he started attributing the success to himself, and then
Mm-hmm.
his believer, like I guess his more righteous friend, he reminded him that all of this is from Allah, but he wasn't like kind of taking the advice. And then the next day when he came, like everything was destroyed, and that was his lesson that he had to learn. And I still remember the one thing my teacher said from that story. She's like, always give the credit to Allah. Like it's okay to talk about your blessings and your favors. I mean, Allah's favors upon you. You're supposed to do that. You're always supposed to give the credit back to Allah. It's never supposed to be like, oh yeah, I did this because of me. Like I'm so smart. I'm so awesome. It's supposed to always take you back to Allah.
I think that's actually difficult for a lot of people because I've heard some comments where,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, so I have this blessing, but I worked for it. Like we hear that, especially now with the current social environment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, but I work for it. Well, not really. Like I would say that let's say how you grew up,
Hmm.
that was not on you. That was all Allah's gift to you. So let's say that you grew up and you did not have an abusive household. You did not have an alcoholic parents. You did not have to take care of your kids while your parents were working at nights. You didn't have to, not your kids, like your siblings.
Hmm.
If you didn't have to do any of that, that is a gift from Allah to you. And so for you to say, "Oh, I worked hard enough," well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, working hard is one equation of it, but in the end, all of everything you are has been given to you by Allah. Period.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that statement kind of I think it's what people it's coming from a place of like where, well, what I did, does it not matter? or like does it not hold any weight? And the thing is, yes, it does hold weight, but it's because Allah allowed you to do that. Like you may have worked for the blessing. Nobody's saying that you didn't work for it, but Allah allowed you to work for it. Like, if you used your brain, Allah gave you that brain. If you used your limbs to get to where you are, Allah gave you those limbs. The hidayah, the tawfiq to work, like, basically the ability to act on the guidance. Allah gave you that too. So you may have worked for it, but you could have never worked for it on your own as well.
Yeah. But we're completely dependent on Allah, subhanAllah. So moving on to page 19 on this section, I have a quote written down here. A real man, I believe that's your quote actually. A real man is not someone who screams amongst people in gathering. Rather, a real man is only he who screams over himself and steers it back to Allah. Let's talk about a real man.
Okay.
Actually, the title is "Who is a Real Man," and I just love that. I just love when I saw it. I'm like, yes, because we have a complete messed up understanding sometimes, and he's saying is that someone who can control himself. What did you think of when you chose this quote?
I guess for me I was thinking of it in the bigger picture, because this is a tazkiyah book, like self rectification and purification of the heart kind of book. So I was like, whenever one of us sets out on a journey to rectify ourselves, we kind of think that now it's our job to like preach to everybody, right? Like, just because we're doing something, now we're like, oh, everybody should be doing it. Our whole household has to be the same way. Everybody, and like, in our family has to be the same way. So we kind of go around preaching to people, and we have just started the journey. We've probably only taken a couple of steps towards Allah, and we want everybody to come with us, so that's where I was kind of looking at it from. But he's like, no, you're not a real man or a real woman. I would say, like, you're not like a real believer if you're just like screaming amongst people like, hey, do this and hey, do that, and like you're not a good enough Muslim, and your hijab is not right and whatever. And he's saying that you're really like true in your basically like your aim to come closer to Allah if you're like yelling at yourself, by yelling, like, just taming your own ego. Like, don't try to tame other people's ego, just tame your own ego first, kind of thing.
I actually liked the tame of your ego, because that's the second thing that I wanted to share about this. I love his analogies. His analogies are all over this book, and most of them are nature oriented. And this one, he talks about, this is what he says: whoever is concerned with this world and not bothered about the hereafter is like someone to whom a lion approaches for the kill, and then a flea comes and bites him. And so he becomes distracted with the flea from paying any attention to the lion. So this is a continuation of what he's talking about, screaming, that you're so concerned about the flea, which is so insignificantly small, and there's a lion in front of you, which to me is like our own selves, our own egos, our own base desires, our own, all of those weaknesses. That is in front of you, but I'm so focused on like a little bite that I'm getting from nothing. And I just love that analogy. Lion attack versus a flea attack. That's what I called it. And it's like just, it's on the side of my note.
Yeah.
And he continues and he says, whoever is heedless of Allah busies himself with the trivial, whereas the one who is not heedless of him will preoccupy himself with none other than him. So in this essence, the lion is everything that has to do with Allah, and the flea is everything that doesn't.
Yeah.
And how that completely narrows our concerns down. Like nothing else. And then he just narrows it down to just one thing. There's nothing else that we need to be worried about. That's what made me think of that. That was on page 20 for those who are reading alongside us. It's on top of the page 20. So Shaheen, you have another quote there on page 23. You want to talk about it?
Okay, and to the same topic of self-rectification, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the quote was, have you ever seen a lover who does not wish to meet his beloved? Whoever wants to know what his reality is with Allah and see his standing with him, then let him look at his prayer. It is either with calmness and humility or with heedlessness and haste. So obviously the first part, like, have you ever seen a lover who does not wish to meet his beloved, is kind of just, we all know what that kind of feels like, right? Like the person we love most in our life, we always want to talk to them, we're always thinking about them, we want to spend as much time with them as possible. But when it comes to salah, salah is literally our like communication with Allah, right? It's our one-on-one time with Allah, and the way we treat that, the way we come to it, the way we look forward to it or not, kind of shows us how much love and respect we have in our heart for Allah. Because if we really loved Him like we should, then we would be looking forward to prayer. We wouldn't kind of be like, oh, it's dhuhr, but it's okay, I'll just pray later, or like, and just procrastinating and not really being passionate about salah. But I think when you're passionate towards something and you can't wait to go do that, that's what shows what you really love.
And he says that here, measure and weigh yourself with the prayer. And
Yeah.
it did really, this was a kind of a part of this book where I had to like take a deep breath, because this is something I personally struggle with. And I mentioned that before, just focusing on the prayer and making it something that you're like, oh, I really want to do this. And there's some moments where I've felt that and it's been so beautiful, but that's not something that happens a lot. It happens like super rarely. And I feel really bad for that. And he says that if you have to drag your feet to the prayer, then cry over yourself. I'm like, oh my God. Like, let me just. And yeah, that was something that I just really had to pause and think about. And the meeting with your beloved, I relate to that as well, because I remember there was a time when my husband was away for like 2 months, and he was coming back, and I was going to pick him up, and you get that butterflies in your stomach, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to meet him. It's that feeling that needs to exist on a very pure level with Allah. And and that is really hard. And he says, cry over yourself if you can. I'm like, yeah, I am. Because it's sad. You're missing a sweetness,
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how the words he used. He's like, look at your prayer. Is it with calmness and humility, or heedlessness and haste? And I think the haste part, like maybe somebody's spending time in their prayer, but they're heedless. But then other people, like they're just rushing through their prayer. So there's different ways in which you can be disconnected from your salah. It's not just one way.
Yeah.
I just found that really, like, he was just right on point with the word choice.
And also thinking about prayer is, you had the 5 daily prayer, but then you have all the optional ones, the same regard for them as well. And I think that's a journey that I want to take. I don't know how, but like he mentions later on, we'll talk about how purification is everything, and that would help to get us there, where we are thinking of Allah as, oh my God, I can't wait for the prayer time to come so that I can be there again. And then obviously then when you are on your deathbed, then you're like, oh, I'm going to meet Allah. It's that same desire. Oh, I can't wait, because you've been waiting for all this time. And
yeah, that when you said that, it kind of got goosebumps, because I remembered that statement from the Prophet was talking to Aisha radiallahu anha, right? And he was telling her that whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah loves to meet him. And then she asked him, like, well, don't we all hate death though? Like, are we all afraid of death? But I don't remember how he explained it, but I think it was something about like the believer and when they long for Allah. Like, it's not about not being afraid of death, because we're all afraid of death, right? It's more about like, how much do you want to meet him in the afterlife?
Yeah. We all do, but we just have to prove it. We have to prove it, and we have to make it part of our everyday existence.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, we're going back. We're going back to page 18.
Okay.
For some reason. I don't know. We're doing it now. It is under the title Reality of Faith. Is it? On page 18? Yes. And nothing repels the descent of divine succor like pride. Rain only settles on shallow lands, not on mountain peaks. I just love that imagery, and I drew it. I drew the whole scene on the side of this book.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because the rain is coming down, and it's not setting on somebody. This rain, Allah's blessings, Allah's love, our love for Him, everything that we just talked about that we want to attain. It cannot settle into a place which is on a high point. It always settles in the valleys. The rain settles in the valleys, and it's just simply going to slide down if you have so much pride within you. And that is something to always remember, that we're talking about how to achieve that. Well, we have a certain sense of pride within us. And I do have like a difficulty sometimes, like what does what does pride really mean? Because sometimes we're like, oh, pride is about, oh yeah, I have the best clothes, I have the best house, but pride is more deeper than that. I think that's like a shallow level of pride. Then you have this deep level of pride, which is something I have a hard time still truly understanding, and that's probably why I have struggled with prayer,
Mm-hmm.
putting the two together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I have to seek within myself and find out, okay, where is that pride that's coming in where I'm not making that connection?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to say about it?
No, I think you explained it well.
Then you have something else on page 9.
9 or
19, sorry, page 19.
okay.
And it is, do not think that the unfortunate person is someone who is a war captive or a prisoner. On the contrary, the truly unfortunate person is someone who disobeys Allah and brings into this pure kingdom the filth of disobedience. And, another quote later on, but we don't have to go through that one. But I think the reason why I really wanted to write this down is in his entire reading that I've read so far, he talks about disobedience. He doesn't talk about kufr or disbelief. He talks about disobedience. Like, we're not even concerned about kufr. Like, it's out of the realm of the consideration of this book or of saving our souls, It's disobedience, which is everything. And that just, and he mentions it over and over again. And I just really, really think about it. Because every time we do something that is an act of disobedience, it's not a small matter. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Want to add on to this a little bit?
I was trying to think about why. Okay, I was trying to think of which word in Arabic would he have used for disobedience, because or for somebody who disobeys Allah, because there are different levels of disobedience. And I wish that we had that insight to be able to tell which level of disobedience he's talking about, because the word disobedience to me is very powerful. I think it implies somebody who is committing sins out of carelessness or out of a disrespect or a disregard for who Allah is. Because what I'm thinking about is we're all going to sin, right? And like Allah said that if we were not going to sin, then he would replace us with people who would sin just so they could ask for forgiveness. So we are meant to slip, like that we are created that way. We're designed to fall. But that's why I'm really curious about his use of the word disobedience, because he really said that, like the quote that you just read, he was saying that he brings into this pure kingdom the filth of disobedience, right? And I think to me that's a very powerful imagery. So I can't be sure, but the image that I'm getting is of somebody who's like a transgressor, right? Somebody who constantly is transgressing the limits of Allah, someone who's committing the major sins, maybe somebody who is, taking away the rights of others or causing destruction. Those kinds of sins are the ones that I am imagining that he's talking about, though I can't be sure.
Well, for me, I think, from what I understand so far, is that depends on where you are in your spirituality. So if a person who is already, mashallah, not doing those things and they have reached a certain level, then they're not safe from this either, because then their level of transgression, which may appear to us to be small, is still pretty great. So maybe that's where it's not a blanket statement, but it depends on what your level is, and how much do you care for sin, like how much do you really value it.
I think that last thing you said makes sense.
Because I don't remember who said this. Was it like one of the Sahabas who talked about the sin of how a person sees a sin as a fly, and I see a sin as a mountain? I don't know.
Yeah, he said. Yeah, it was a statement of the Sahabi. He said that the fajr, meaning that the person who transgresses a lot, they see the sin as a fly that he can just like swat away. It's not a big deal. The believer sees it as a mountain. Yeah, the believer can't forget about their sins because it's like a burden weighing down on him.
Yeah. How important.
Yeah.
We're a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next topic on hardship and trials and risk and tribulations. I myself felt that this was something really relevant. And so this is a quote that we had. How many states are hidden in you? When trials and tribulations befall, they are revealed. The most sinful of them is doubt about Allah, and doubt about one's provisions is in reality a doubt about the provider himself. And Shaheen, he chose this quote, and it was nice. Would you like to share what made you
I
choose it?
did. I had one reflection about it, and then now when you read it, I had another reflection about it. So
Pile on the reflections.
okay, so what he was saying, like when trials and tribulations befall, like it reveals the inner state of our heart, right? It reveals our inner state that we might not even know of. So I think that's one benefit of
Yes.
trials and tribulations that he's getting at. That not only is it going to purify you, but it's also going to let you know what kind of person you are, right? Because in hardship, our true colors come out. We are exposed to the parts of ourselves that we may not want to be exposed to.
Yeah.
That was one. And then he said the most sinful of these things is doubt about Allah, because when we have problems, we're like, oh, like, why did Allah do this to me? Or, why would Allah do this to me if I'm a believer? Or like, just we start questioning things. And I know he specifically mentions like the thing about provisions, but I think that that same idea can apply to basically any of Allah's names. Like when people sin and then they fall into despair, they believe they lose hope in Allah's mercy, right? So and we're not allowed to lose hope in Allah's mercy as believers. Like it's haram for us to do that, because Shaitan did that. And then he's saying that doubt about one's provisions is in reality a doubt about the provider. So like when you think that you're not going to be taken care of, you're doubting who Allah is, because Allah already promised to take care of all of us. I mean, if He takes care of the birds and the animals, then what about us, right? He even takes care of the kuffar, so why wouldn't He take care of us? And I think that in a state of hardship, we fall into despair and we start to like become like doubtful, right? We become doubtful about Allah's mercy on us, and that where is the provision going to come from? Is Allah even going to provide for me? Astaghfirullah. And like on the provision point, this was the reflection that I had initially written down. That was asking myself, how can I overcome my fear of lack of provision, especially with like COVID going on. This was something I was personally struggling with, and I've been out of a job for a while, and I was kind of like, okay, like, and even if I have provision, how is it going to last, right? Like what, like how long? And I'm sure this is such a relevant question for so many people. And I was thinking that when we are afraid of losing provision, we want to hoard. We want to hold on to it. We don't want to give. But especially in the month of Dhul Hijjah that we find ourselves in, and with the state that Yemen is in, and there's so many opportunities to give. What happens is that Allah says that if you give, I'll give you more, right? Like that's what we believe in, that as a principle. And so I found that even when I gave like a little bit, Allah always gave back. And subhanAllah, like sometimes I wouldn't even give. Sometimes I would just make the intention of giving, and even before I gave, Allah would give back to me. And I was like, whoa, like there's like once you take that first step, Allah's gonna be like, I got you. You just gotta like trust Him enough. And this is still a learning process for me, but subhanAllah, like I would tell anybody to experiment with that. Like when you feel like holding on, when you feel like holding on, just give, right? Just for the sake of Allah, just even if it's $1, just give it for His sake, and you'll find that it's always gonna come back to you.
That's so beautiful. This requires a lot of trust in Him to know exactly who He is, and He says He's gonna do it. So why are we feeling like He's not? Yeah, that's when you mentioned the even the kuffars and the believe in Him, or He provides for. I just wanted to go back quickly, and I just love this quote. It said the sweetness of His love is not in food and drink, as even disbelievers and beasts have that in common with you. Instead, join the angels in sweetness of His remembrance and utter devotion to Allah, because the souls cannot bear the dribble of the egos. And I just love that so much. It's like everybody He provides, like you mentioned, for everyone. Like we have a commonality with everyone, but then we have to join the angels, in their love and their remembrance and all of that. So what you said really just reminded me about it. That and they have a complete unshaken devotion to Allah. You know, when he's like, okay, do this, they're like, sure. You know, they just do it because they know it's coming from a place which is going to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be on that same mindset as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, mashallah. And I had a little quote here where he's doing the fugitive slave analogy. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of his analogy, which was really, really nice. And he
Yeah.
says, he asked you to cross over to him. Oh, moreover, you are a fugitive slave. He asked you to
Mm-hmm.
cross over to him, but instead you fled from him. Since fleeing manifests through deeds, states, and aspirations. Hence, you are unmindful in your prayer, speaking gibberish during your fast, or complaining about Allah's kindness. Are you then not a fugitive? Like, are you just not somebody that who shouldn't be where he's at? I'm like, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
am. You know, like a runaway
Yeah.
person, like really bad. There was
Mm-hmm.
part in this book where I felt, you know, the author followed a Sufi madhab, and I felt it really popped up. Like, I don't know, do you remember what the pages there were? And I'm like, I'm not really sure what all of this is. So there was a little bit of Sufism definitely in here, which I didn't.
Oh yeah, they used the Shadili tariqa. Um, it's by Sheikh Abul Hassan al-Shadili. He's the one who established the tariqa, and that's the one that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe the author of this book, it was his student,
Yeah, it
if
was
I remember
something like that, if I
correctly.
remember correctly as well. They mentioned him several times in
Yeah.
here. Yeah, so that was something just to remember. I think it was towards page 25 and 26 where I was like, all right, I don't fully
Mhm.
understand. There's a level
Yeah.
which I'm not getting is because I don't really know that very well. But it's
Yeah.
surrounded itself with serenity and all those things. So actually, before we get there, it is our next session, and we titled it as On Good Company. And the quote that I want to share with you is this one. If you had searched with sincerity, then you would have found them. The reason for you not finding them, the people of the hereafter, is your lack of preparation. Just like if we are always supposed to be around good company, and no matter where we are, especially now, we can find them, right? We can find it online. We can find it in a form of classroom. We will be taking a class together online, and
Mhm.
it really actually really sticks with me because when I was back in a smaller city, and I talk about that several times, I did not
Mhm.
have a very good environment, but I wanted it really badly. And what he's saying is that you did not have it because you were not prepared. So I was not prepared in my heart to for it. So that's why I didn't find it. Otherwise, I would have found it. And I'm like, oh, so the responsibility of the good company in that way is on me. If I don't
Mhm.
have good enough friends, then I'm not a good enough friend myself, to the other person. I need to be working on that.
Mhm.
That's why I wanted to share that. Do you have some thoughts about it?
Yeah, I was just thinking like I guess people they try to like when they embark upon the journey of like self-rectification, right? They might be like, well, I need a buddy to like hold me, to go along, or I need a teacher first, or I need a mentor first.
Hmm.
But it's like, no, if you have a basic understanding of Islam, you can still embark upon the journey,
Mm-hmm.
and you can still do the things that you know you're supposed to be doing, and then Allah will bring the people that you need,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I don't think it should be an excuse that you're not in good company right now, so you can't really do the inner work, or you can't really, worship Allah the way you want to because you don't have the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like even like single people, right? They're like, oh, I can't wait to get married because I want my spouse to wake me for Fajr. Like it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard because
Yeah.
like your mom's waking up for Fajr your whole life. Like you haven't been waking up for Fajr. Like all of a sudden when you get married, you're gonna start waking up for Fajr, you're gonna start becoming practicing, or like somebody's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to have this like amazing best friend or my spouse to like keep me on the deen, and we're gonna be deen buddies. It's like a very romanticized idea. And I
Yeah.
feel like it never happens that way. Like I don't like if you're not practicing before, you're not gonna change because of another person.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you're actually gonna find them annoying if they do that for you. Like if you're not praying your sunnahs, and all of a sudden you get married to somebody who's a little bit more religious or practicing than you, and now they're pulling you along, it's actually going to cause friction. It's not going to be the fairy tale that you imagined it to be, because you have to kind of
It's like coming
already
from
be
you.
on that path on your own. Yeah, it has to come from you, and then Allah will bring the like-minded people to your life, whoever they are,
I just
right?
love that. And you know, the thing about the whole spouse thing is also like if you're not practicing, and in our case, he is practicing, why would he want to marry you? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Like if it were looking at me, I had some things, right? I'm like, I don't want a person who is, going to bars and whatever. I don't want that life, right? Like I have a standard. So then why am I gonna go with someone and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make him not go to bars? I think that is a failing step to be standing on. Like you're already starting off on something that is so shaky that what's the point about that? Like it's not very smart at all. And
Exactly. I feel like, yeah, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
no, it just makes me laugh because it is a romanticizing of something that doesn't even exist.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like it's also a procrastination method, right? Like Shaitan always has that thing where he's like, people always say, "Oh, I'll do this when." It's like I'll put on hijab after this. I'll become a better person when this happens, or when I'm around good company or whatever it is, or when I embark upon this official journey of seeking Islamic knowledge, then I'm going to change all my habits and I'm going to become a whole new person all at once. But it doesn't happen all at once,
It
We
really
just don't
doesn't.
work that way. And I think the point that he's also getting at is like, how sincere are you on the path to Allah? Are you only going to walk the path when you have somebody pushing you? Like, do you need somebody to push you to Allah? Or do you have enough of that drive inside of you that you're going to start walking towards Allah, even if you have to crawl? Like, are you going to do it before you have somebody doing it with you?
And what we know for a fact is that we do have that drive because our soul has that drive. It wants to go back to Allah. So we have it. We just have to uncover it sometimes. And when you're talking about what can I do if I don't have people around me? Well, we have books like these, and
Mm-hmm,
other
mm-hmm,
books where we can be like, all right, how can I begin this journey on myself? And inshallah, someone else will come along the way where I can grow even more. But yeah, I need to be working constantly on this. Even if
mm-hmm,
even if this is the only thing I have until I die, this
mm-hmm.
was something. And I did that on my own. And I think that's something to be proud of. You know?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
I love the point you mentioned about the book because that's even how I found people like I found even Islamic books. Like how did I know which books to read? It was because I was following like-minded people on social media, and I would see them posting reflections, you included, right? And I would see people posting the reflections, and I was like, oh, here's a like-minded person. Like I want to follow them. I want to interact with this person because they are walking the path that I want to walk. And you kind of you like take away the access of the people whose path you're not trying to walk, so you can make space for the people who are walking, like who are kind of journeying towards Allah, and then you can join them. And then I think through that we find more people, we find more resources. Like right now we're just having a discussion, but then maybe somebody will find a class to go join, and then they'll be
Mm-hmm.
studying text with a teacher. And I feel like that's when you find like-minded people, they can even lead you to the different avenues through which you
Yeah.
can better yourself.
I love that, mashallah. And it's really important though, right? Like-minded people who are on the like properly like-minded people. Like the people
Yeah.
that you want to be amongst. And I think we forget that in social media completely. I think it's because it's really easy to hit that follow button. But it's
Hmm.
like, and I'm noticing that now. So, like everyone goes through waves of things. And sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, especially when you have different trials happening, which we have a lot happening right now. I feel like this is a very high fitna time for us. And it's still
Hmm.
only going to grow. It's not going to get any better. So I feel like it reveals sometimes people are tested and sometimes the negative comes up. And when that happens, it affects me. Like I am like, oh God, I don't want to see this. It's like immediately like why is this popping up? And I always say that Instagram has been my happy bubble for a long time. And I
Hmm.
cultivated and I was very careful about it because I couldn't find that company. I needed to find it online. And I'm like, I cannot be having stupidity around me. I don't need that. I need it to be a
Hmm.
happy, peaceful, calming, inspiring space. And now there's
Hmm.
a lot of those little voices happening because the trials are bringing it in front of people. And I feel like I have to unfollow a couple of people. And I've been saying that for some time and I just haven't done it. And I think I really need to because
Hmm.
even online, it does affect you. And you don't need that. This life is way too short for us
Hmm.
to need it.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with the whole social media thing because I was at some point following 600 people. I don't even know
Oh,
why. I don't know
yeah,
how.
you went crazy. You did.
Yeah, I'm telling you about this before. I was like, why am I following 600 people? Like my feed it was just exploding, and it became so overwhelming that I literally just went back to zero. like I had to unfollow everybody, and then I slowly started following back friends and family and the accounts that really like, just spoke to my heart and like helped me have like helped me grow basically, personal and spiritual development, whatever. And yeah, just and when you talk to me about how Instagram is your happy place, I was like, wait, that's possible? Like I can make social media my happy place? So I just went
Yes.
out on a quest to do that. Like I started following things I like. Like I love comics, for example. So I started following these like cute animal comics and stuff, just little cute things here and there just to make me smile because I was like, hey, this is something that makes me happy. I don't have to follow like toxic people or people who are talking about drama all the time or like the latest controversies. I don't need to be following that kind of stuff. So I think you can create your little happy bubble. So
Talking about the controversies, there was
uh-huh.
there was a situation that happened on my Instagram stories, and I was like, "What are they talking about?" And I clicked on that account, and that was a mistake. Subhanallah, like it just like it felt like it was like a vomit of just I did not want to be part of it. It felt so uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
in that, this was really interesting. In that, they was like, oh yeah, this person is talking about real Islam, and I was like, all right, so let's see, because there's that little the real Islam, people do that, and I'm like, right, I clicked on it,
Yeah.
and that person was not even talking about the real Islam. They actually were an ex-Muslim who were
Oh,
using verses. You just had to read it to understand what was happening. And I'm like,
oh my God.
subhanallah, like this is exactly how things go downhill from one thing. Maybe the intention of the original poster was good,
Hmm.
but then how, because of the tone that it took and because of how it just was not good, it turned into
Hmm.
something that can actually eventually lead people astray if they were to follow that one comment. So it's really
Hmm.
important. And I was like, God, this is so nasty. And it's coming from an account which I wouldn't expect it to come from, who shared it on their stories. And I'm like, okay, I need to pare down
Hmm.
because, I mean, look
Yeah.
how what it opened up to. And I was like feeling nasty the whole day. you know
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
just affects you that way. And speaking of feeling nasty, I liked what he said in one of the
Mhm.
quotes. It is
Yeah.
also on page 26.
Hmm.
And if only you were to treat yourself like your coat. Whenever it gets dirty, you wash it, and whenever anything of it rips, you mend and fix it. Then you would be righteous. The felicitous
Yeah.
word. Felicitous. I think it's
Yeah.
felicitous. I think that's how it's pronounced. So that really, really impacted me for several reasons. One is because I really like to be mindful of my clothes. I like to know where I'm getting it from. And when you're like getting it from a good source, they're more expensive. And so you
Hmm.
have to care for them better. And
Hmm.
so, me and my husband, we wash clothes differently. We don't wash the same. He does his own laundry, I do my own. And he's like, Samia, do you want me to do yours? I'm like, no, I don't, because you're going to ruin my clothes, and I can't be doing that. I cannot. So that really affected me because I'm like, yes, treating yourself, it's like your
Hmm.
quote, you get dirty and wash it, but you treat it with respect also.
Hmm.
And all
Yeah.
of that together, when you're seeing, oh my God, I am failing in this. I think I did this wrong today. It's the same muhasabah concept again. I did
Hmm.
this wrong. Let me immediately address it, because if I don't fix that rip in the quote, next time I wear it, it's gonna be bigger.
Hmm.
It's gonna just rip even more. So all of that just kind of brought it all together for me. This idea of self rectification, improvement, all those things.
Yeah, and that your quote example reminds me like kind of how like whoever is whatever they're passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever objects they're passionate about or like whatever is valuable to somebody, that's what they take care of, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
some people take care of their clothes a lot, some people take care of their shoes. Some people take care of their cars, constantly polishing them. And, like my brother's a huge car enthusiast. He can never get enough of like, taking care of his car. He's always doing something to it. And just, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm not trying to say anything's wrong with that, but I'm just saying like, why don't we take the same care of our heart and our soul? Like how much time do we really spend thinking about if our heart needs to be cleansed, if our soul needs to be cleansed, to tawbah and istighfar and all of that.
We like to be distracted about those things. Oh, I don't want to think about it. Netflix. Like I don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the reality. That's the reality. That's why we're here talking about it, so that we can fix that about ourselves. And talking about life and how little it is. I just started a class. It's like a small 9-day Dhul Hijjah class on Surah Mulk.
Hmm.
And so you have a recitation, and then he talks a little bit of reflection on it. And he talked about Surah Mulk and the whole concept. I won't explain all of that, but he mentions how there are two deaths and two lives. He combines Surah Mulk beginning and Surah Tahrim end. And he mentions that there are two deaths and two lives. And you have the life and, all of that. And he mentioned this life that we're on is on this spiritual journey that we're on. And this life is the shortest of our journeys. Before we existed, it was nothing and it was long. Like when the souls were created. And this is the shortest one. In our grave, obviously, it's the longest that we know of now. And then after that is the hereafter, which is never ending. So this is the shortest life. And it's worth it for us to value ourselves enough to give us a good chance for the other ones.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You had a final quote on this to share? And it's actually his last quote on our section 2, I think.
Okay, do we have it written or should I just read it?
No, we don't have it written. You can read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this quote was not by the author himself, but it was by the one whose madhab or whatever we're following, Sheikh Abul Hasan al-Shadili. He said, "The friends of Allah are like brides, and brides are not seen by criminals." And I've seen this quote like circulating around on social media in the past, and I was like, that's so interesting. What does that mean? And I remember having a discussion about this with somebody, and we were trying to figure out like, okay, what does that exactly mean? But then it makes perfect sense because you read the paragraph that came right before it where he was talking about good company, right? And I love how he said brides because everybody, like, the way brides were treated traditionally, like they were kind of isolated away from people, taken care of, kept hidden, like a valuable, like precious jewel. They were like adorned and beautified, and like just the imagery that he provides. And then he's like a criminal, right? So he's like, a criminal's not going to have access to a bride. The bride is well protected. She's, surrounded by her friends and family. She's, there's a lot of like good energy and positive vibes about her. Like if you're a criminal, if you're just somebody who's on the street doing like, whatever, you're not going to have access to her, and it's like that. It's like the good people, like, I guess the gems in the eyes of Allah, right? The friends of Allah, they're so valuable that you're not just going to get access to them just like that. Like I feel like you have to, I think what he's trying to say is that you have to kind of work towards being the type of person, and then you become worthy of meeting them and learning from them and kind of like benefiting from them.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I didn't put the criminal on the street and the bride inside protected together. Because it's a little bit, when you read it, you're like, what? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, exactly. The first time I was like, what does that mean? Like, I thought about this quote so much. I still don't know. Like, I'd never really heard a scholar explain it. That's just the way I understood it.
Yeah.
I just found such a profound example. Like
he says on page 26, if you want to see the bride, then you have to forsake immorality. Like, if you want a righteous, in this case, a person in your life, then she's not going to be interested if you're, filthy with immorality. That's how else. But I think it actually is a good point, because we have to remember that these books were written a long time ago, and sometimes the wording that's used is very much like, wait, hang on, you have to put yourself back a little bit and change your glasses, as they say, to go back, because he talks a little bit about slavery here too. There was a point where he mentions that, and I was like, oh, this will not fly at 2020 at all,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, because about training a slave and then going up, and I was like, dang. But yeah, I mean, but it was very relevant to his time period. And we can still think that right now, if you think of kings and queens and, even people that, I mean, you would think about it. It's really sad. But the celebrity culture, there's regular celebrity, like anybody. They're like, oh my God, yeah, we're going to have a meet and greet. You dress up and so well. And it's just very sad because we don't do that to where it really needs to happen, but we'll do it for someone who is just not even caring about their life.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a really good discussion. Do you have any takeaways that you want to take from this?
I don't know what I was thinking, but...
And this is open to everybody, that you're listening, that you're watching us, or listening to us on a podcast, for you as well. What is your takeaway?
Yeah, the listeners, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I mentioned already a little bit of what I really want to get from this. Is this idea of what I want to find, what is that pride in my heart that is stopping me from something, from achieving goodness? Like, what is it? And the way to uncover that is istighfar and stuff, which we talked about in the previous one, and other ways of purifying your heart. So for me, I want to dig a little bit deeper and be like, what is it that's really hindering me from achieving that level of khushu' in prayer? Like, I want to find that. That would be my takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good one. For me, I feel like I'm going backwards a little bit because I think one of the things I was going to mention before, but I wasn't able to, was we started off with envy, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about envy and stuff like that. So I was thinking that basically, like, I feel like one of the, like, what basically envy is like you kind of want something that somebody else has, but you also don't want them to have it. That's the worst kind of envy. Um, and that's the
Yes.
one we seek refuge in from when we say when we read Surah Al-Falaq, right? And but then there's another kind of like jealousy. It's not really envy, but it's jealousy where you don't want it to be taken away from the other person, but you kind of want it for yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still jealousy, and it still destroys your good deeds. So we should be, beware of that as well. So what I thought was somebody shared a post on Facebook a couple of weeks ago that I was reading, and they were talking about how in the witr dua, the dua of Qunut, the one that the Shafi'i people read, there's a statement in there that says, "Oh Allah, bless me in what you have given me." And I think that was for me like a game changer, because I was like, if anybody's struggling with these feelings of that why don't I have something, like you don't necessarily want it to be taken away from the other person, but you kind of want it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But that thing, like barakah, is such a huge thing. Like if you can have everything in the world, but if there's no barakah in it, it's never going to benefit you, and instead it might even make you miserable. But if you have very little and Allah blesses it for you,
Mm-hmm.
like that's it. You don't need to ever look at what anybody else has, because Allah can bless it for you. And I feel like that's so powerful. I think that's why dua of qunut, like in so many ways, it's so powerful, right? That's why so many Muslims in Ramadan, and they read it after Tarawih, and everybody's crying, and I feel like it's such a powerful dua. But for me, that specific line was just very powerful, because I was like, oh, like it's actually so easy. Like you can just ask Allah to bless you in what you have, and that's it. Like that's the solution. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it just seems so simple, but it really, I feel like it really works. Like Allah can just make so much good come out of something so little.
He
You know.
actually mentions that on page 45 or 25. I didn't read that before. O slave of
Hmm.
Allah, if you are to ask Allah for something, then ask
Hmm.
Him to better you in all respects, and that He betters you so that you become content with Him planning your affairs for you.
Well, I didn't even see that.
Like,
Yeah.
yes. And I love
Yeah.
that your reflection was on online with that one, your takeaway, inshallah. So, this was our book club session for today. I hope and we hope that you guys really enjoyed it and you benefited from it. Let us know in the comments your takeaway or DM or whatever. And we're actually going to be sharing your reviews on Instagram. So, message us your reviews, what you think about this, and we'll put you out there and we'll share your words with everyone. And inshallah, that is it for today. Anything else you want to add, Shaheen, before we go?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys on Instagram, in the
Yes.
comments, in the DMs. Just let us know your feedback and any questions, whatever. Just
Yeah, let
anything.
us know
Just
what
talk
you
to us.
thought about today's format, how it went, was it better, things like that. So we want to improve this
Mhm.
discussion, inshallah. Thank you very much for joining us today,
Mhm.
and we will see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. I was like, now.